Imagine this for a second. Your family's land, the place tied to your bloodline and history, suddenly stolen. And not just stolen, but covered with 96 brand new houses built without your permission. Most people would feel helpless, maybe even give up. But not her. She waited. She planned. And when the time was right, she turned their biggest victory into their biggest mistake. The land didn't look like much to outsiders. Just a spread of 20 acres on the edge of a small southern town, with soil too stubborn for farming and pecan trees whose branches reached like weary arms into the sky. But to Clara Johnson, it was more than just dirt. It was a story, one written by her great-grandfather, a freedman who had worked his hands raw until he could finally buy it. Through slavery, through Jim Crow, through decades of injustice, the Johnson family had held on to this land as proof that they belonged, proof that they endured. Clara's father had always said, "Baby girl, this land isn't just ground beneath your feet. It's our pride, our blood. Never let it go, no matter what." So when he passed and Clara became the last heir, she took that promise like a vow. No matter how poor she got, no matter how tempting the offers, she would never sell. What she didn't know then was that the biggest test of her vow was coming. It started with letters, envelopes with gold lettering, promising riches if she'd sell her land. Then came phone calls, then men in suits at her front porch. One, tall with slicked-back hair, spoke smoothly. "Mrs. Johnson, we represent Willow Creek Development. We're building a beautiful new community. Parks, schools, homes. We'd like to make you a generous offer for your property. It's a win-win for everyone." Clara folded her arms. "This isn't property, this is legacy, not for sale." The man's smile wavered. "You don't want to stand in the way of progress, ma'am." Clara's eyes hardened. "Progress doesn't mean erasing history." The suits left. But they weren't done. Weeks later, Clara was jolted awake by the sound of machinery. She rushed outside, and her heart nearly stopped. Bulldozers, workers, chainsaws ripping into her pecan trees, the earth she played on as a child torn apart under wheels. She screamed, "Stop! This is my land! You have no right!" A foreman waved a paper in her face. "We got permits. It's legal." But when Clara looked closely, the permits were a mess of signatures and stamps she'd never seen. She went straight to the county office, slamming her family deed on the desk. "This land is mine. My father left it to me. How could you let them build on it?" The clerk barely looked up. "Ma'am, our records show Willow Creek has authorization. If you want to dispute it, you'll have to take it up in court." Court meant lawyers. Lawyers meant money. Money Clara didn't have. The HOA thought they had cornered her. They thought she was powerless. But what they didn't know was that Clara had something more dangerous than money. She had patience, and she had knowledge. For months, Clara stayed quiet. Neighbors whispered that she'd been defeated, that the mighty developers had won. But in the evenings, Clara sat by her old oak table, poring over every scrap of paper tied to her land. Deeds, wills, maps, legal notes from over a century ago. She knew her great-grandfather had been smart. He'd added protections when he bought the land, and then she found it. A restrictive covenant from 1872. It said, "This land shall remain under the authority of the heirs of Elijah Johnson, and no development shall take place upon it without their written consent." In modern terms, every single one of those 96 houses had been built illegally. Clara didn't storm into the office. She didn't picket or shout. She let them build. She let the HOA pour millions into roads, utilities, and shiny new homes. And when the last house was finished, she struck. At the first HOA board meeting after the neighborhood opened, the room was buzzing with champagne and celebration. 96 families ready to move in. The developers bragging about profits. Then Clara walked in, alone, calm, carrying a single folder. The room fell silent. The HOA president sneered. Mrs. Johnson, this is private property. You're trespassing. Clara opened the folder, pulling out her deed and the covenant. Private property? You mean my property? Because according to this, she laid the papers on the table, every single house you built sits on land that still belongs to me? Laughter broke out. That can't be right. But Clara only smiled. Oh, it's right. And now, you all have two choices. Buy the land from me at my price, or get ready to explain to 96 families why they don't own the ground under their homes. The HOA scrambled. Lawyers were called. They tried to bury Clara in paperwork, intimidate her, drag her through court. But every time, the covenant held. Every judge looked at the evidence and shook their head. The land was Clara's, and always had been. What's more, since the HOA had built without her consent, Clara now had the right to charge rent on every home that sat on her land. 96 homes, 96 families, 96 checks every month. The HOA begged her to settle. They offered her millions to sell. But Clara only raised her price higher. She wasn't just fighting for money. She was fighting for every ancestor who had been told their land, their lives, their worth didn't matter. And she wasn't about to give it away cheap. Months later, the headline hit the news. Local woman wins historic land battle against HOA. Developers forced to pay millions. Clara didn't gloat. She didn't smile for the cameras. She stood on her porch, overlooking the homes that now stood on her family's land and whispered, "Daddy, we kept it, just like I promised." For the new homeowners, life went on. They paid rent to Clara, or the HOA paid her lump sums to keep them there. But no one in Willow Creek would ever forget the lesson. Never underestimate the power of history, of family, of one determined woman. They thought she was powerless. Just one woman against an empire of money, lawyers, and power. But what they didn't see was the legacy behind her, the bloodline, the history, the covenant written generations before. 96 homes built on stolen land. 96 homes that became her greatest victory. And when the trap finally closed, the HOA realized too late that every brick they laid was sealing their own fate.